Hey everybody, my name is Matt and I'm an oboist. One of the aspects of oboe playing that I've grown to enjoy quite a lot is knife sharpening, actually. You can't very well make a reed with a dull knife, and so keeping your knife sharp is super important. And luckily for me, I've taken to the process. Um, I get a lot of questions about how I keep my knife sharp, so I wanted to make a quick video about the process that I use to do that. Before I get too far into it, this process is for double hollow ground knives only. A double hollow ground knife has a hollow bevel cut on both sides that creates kind of a thin, straight razor-like profile. Beveled knives have different geometry, and this process needs to be tweaked a little bit for those. I don't use those very much, so this is what I focus on. The other thing I wanted to point out is this is my process that I use. My goal is to give you some general guidelines and tests to use that will help you create a repeatable process that serves your reed making style and your scraping style. So angles may vary, number of strokes on the stone may vary, but I want to show you my process because I found it works quite well for me and works well for different kinds of knives. So before we start, what do we have here? We have a Landwell medium double hollow ground knife, a fine diamond stone, and a fine ceramic Spyderco stone. This stone is much finer than this stone, so I'm going to start with the rougher stone and finish on the fine stone to get the most clean edge possible. Okay, so I'm going to move this one out of the way. And the process of sharpening a knife is fairly straightforward. You basically grind the knife on the stone until the appropriate amount of metal is removed. And we'll talk about how to figure out how much metal is appropriate in just a minute. So when I sharpen my double hollow ground knives, I'm right-handed, so I scrape this way. I always register the front part of the knife flat on my sharpening stone. I find this suits my scraping angle quite well, and it keeps one angle out of the sharpening process. So I always sharpen flat here. And then when I sharpen on this side, I use a slight angle to also suit my scraping style. Before I start the sharpening process, I want to prove that this knife is dull. So I'm going to kind of scrape the edge on my stone, and I'll show you that it really does not cut paper very well at all. It just kind of tears through it pretty bad. Both the diamond stone and the ceramic stones are really nice because they can be used dry or with water. I tend to use them dry because it's a little less messy, and then when they get dirty or caked with metal shavings, you can just run them under warm tap water and soap and a sponge, and it comes right off. So it's very easy to use and to maintain. So as we prove this knife is very dull, I'm going to first put it flat here on the front side, and I always put it at an angle like this because it lets the entire blade be on the stone at all times. A lot of people sharpen like this and move it that way, and that works fine, except it brings into play the fact that not the entire edge isn't on the stone at the same time, so the edge is getting worn differently at different parts. So for this angle, or for this side of the knife, excuse me, I put the stone perpendicular to my body. So put it there. I put a few fingers on to just solidify things. I'm not pressing hard, but just firmly enough to keep everything on the stone. And you literally just wipe it back and forth. Do that a few times, and we can see that this over time has caused some wear on the knife. And you might ask, how do I know when I'm done? Well, The back side of this knife doesn't need to be sharpened very heavily because it's always sharpened flat. The real test will come on the other side where we have an angle ground into the edge. So I usually just do this pass, 6, 7, 8, a dozen times, as much as I feel like it. And then what I do is I turn the stone this way. This helps me on this side also keep the entire edge on the stone at all times. So now this side, I would put it flat and then raise it up until I find the angle that I'm comfortable with. Now I'm comfortable with about a half an inch, a quarter to a half an inch between the stone and the bottom spine of my knife. You'll find what works best for you with trial and error, and it doesn't take that long. So what I do here is I hold the handle of the knife as I would if I were using it, and I pinch the tip of the knife, the toe of the knife, just to, again, make sure that the entire knife is on the stone at all times, and I'm not going like this at all, okay? So I find that angle and just grind away. Now, that didn't take very long, and I also don't know if I'm done yet. The key to knowing if you're done is to feel for what I call a wire edge. And a wire edge is basically a bunch of metal shavings or metal teeth that are hanging on the opposite edge of the knife. So I was just grinding on this edge right there, and I want to feel here on the back side for that wire edge. Some people call that a burr. And I feel that. I feel it kind of grabbing against my finger. You can probably hear it. So that tells me that this side of the edge has met the other side. We have an apex. All I do then is clean that off, that wire edge. And now I have a relatively sharp but somewhat unrefined edge. This is where we bring in our other stone. This Spyderco ceramic stone is very fine and will give your knife edge a smoother feel. And the finer stone you get, the sharper your knife will feel, but you don't have to do anything different on subsequent stones. You do the exact same process, same angles, same number of swipes. I just find that finer stones help my knife feel smoother and sharper. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay. Turn the stone. Find that angle that feels about right. And then I'm going to check for the burr. And it's a little harder to feel because this stone is so fine, but I do feel a little bit of grabbing on that opposite side. Obviously, you don't want to run your finger this way for fear of getting cut, and you don't want to run your finger this way for fear of getting cut, so be very careful. Turn the stone, clean it. I call it cleaning. It's just removing that burr. And we'll take our same paper. And it's better, but it's still not great. Now, why isn't it great? Well, there's still a little bit, well, there we go, that's a little better. There's still a little bit of that burr hanging on. So then what I like to do is take a strop, a leather strop, and put just the very finishing touches on the edge. So this is the leather strop that I use on my knives. This is literally a piece of an old belt, leather belt glued to some wood, and it's flat. This black is actually metal that has come off from the very, very fine abrasion that is inherent in the leather itself. The way you use the leather strop is identical to the way you use a stone, except instead of going back and forth, we only want to go in one direction on the leather, because if we go if we take our knife and go into the leather, trying to cut into it, we will literally cut into the leather, and we don't want to do that. So all you do is keep the same angles as before and just kind of wipe your edge on the leather. So I did flat there. This is a slight angle, and I'll wipe it there. And this just gets rid of any metal particles or excess wire edge or burr that is left even from our fine stone. So we've done that. And you can do this as much as you want. It's it's doing very little to the edge, so it doesn't really, you can't overdo it, basically. So now let's check our edge on the paper, and hopefully it will slice a little better. And indeed it does. Now, I sometimes use my knife at this stage when it is what I call kitchen knife sharp. It slices really well. And sometimes I'll use one of these metal rods to further refine the edge. What the metal rod really does is bends the edge around ever so slightly so that our scraping angle is better suited. The way that I use the metal rod is I, again, put it flat here, bring it towards myself, towards myself, towards myself, and I've gotten into a rhythm of doing that 3 times, and then roughly the same angle as I had on the stone, maybe slightly higher. You can do the same angle, you can do slightly higher if you want that edge bent around a little bit more. So then some firm strokes, and then your edge should be very keen and should just stick right in your fingernail. Yep. So that's my process of sharpening knives. Feel free to let me know if you have questions. I'll be doing other videos in the future, hopefully about gouger repair, gouger maintenance, other reed making issues, maybe some instrument maintenance, and any other things you might have questions about. So I hope this was helpful, and have a great day. Bye.